there were no decisive battles in World War II, wrote the historian Phillips O'Brien. In his view, the traditional use of set pieces acting as turning points was illusory. The superior Allied resources and planning was always going to prove critical in the end. And so, in the midst of an apparent dogfight in the Scottish Premier Division in late 1993, only one club really had the power to make the difference. How Rangers escaped a supposedly tight race and get into some clear blue water is the story of the winter and early spring of 93-94, and I'm joined by Andy McGowan to talk about that. How are we, Andy?
I'm fine, Martyn. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And after wrestling with technology, we've got John Cowden all the way from Athens. How are we, John?
I'm fine.
You're calm now. Yeah, heart rate is down. Okay, so a few interesting things to talk about from this section of 93-94. Can I start kind of in the middle or maybe nearer the beginning of it, on the 11th of December 1993. We're Dundee United visited Ibrox. Now, I want to talk a wee bit about Ivan Golac, their Croatian manager, replacing Jim McLean, who went upstairs to be effective chairman. And listen, if Mark Hateley was undoubtedly Scotland's star player, then Golac was definitely the newcomer of the season. And I think it's fair to say, McLean was actually quite an underrated forward thinker when it came to training and the way his teams played and prepared. But it's impossible to see Big Jim stopping training, stopping a drill, and taking his players round to smell the flowers of the country part that they were training in, which is what Golac would do. His United side, it's probably fair to say, could be anything on their day. They could be superb, they could be absolutely ridiculously bad, but he was a copy machine. He was an absolute surefire quote winner, and the press loved him because he was colourful in an otherwise pretty grey, let's say unremarkable season in Scotland. They could not get enough of him. Celtic opted for Liam Brady over Golac around that time, in 1991. But the press would sometimes twist his words a wee bit. They said he said that Rangers were on the slide, and he had to correct that, saying, "How can I say that? With the resources they have, the reserve side could live easily here." However, he did say that this Rangers juggernaut could be caught. People talk about how much Rangers dominated in the past, he said, but it is different this season. Rangers are still good, of course, but others have got better. You can tell by the closeness of the league. People don't want the same team running away with everything every year, and Dundee United will definitely be in at the finish. Big talk, Andrew, for a club that was 7th in the table at the time of asking, but after 21 minutes at Ibrox, they looked alright for that kind of proclamation.
This game was I was going to say it's a shock, but we'd lost 3 or 4 games already by that point in the season, but it was a manner of going 3 down so quickly at home to Dundee United, to anybody. On Golac, you're correct, he was something different, and looking back now with the hindsight of decades, it strikes me as quite incredible how McLean was a kingmaker at Dundee United. McLean picked Golac because you would think that a guy that was as methodical and I know you're saying he's a forward thinker, but the same token you could argue he was stuck in his ways a lot, and it was his way or the highway.
In terms of discipline, he was, but training methods and fitness, he didn't quite get the credit because of his manner and his kind of public persona.
Correct.
But this game,
maybe pick somebody in his own mould, but that certainly wasn't the case with Golac.
No, absolutely wasn't. John, before we get into the details of this game, and we certainly revisit Dundee United next week, your thoughts on Golac that season, what you can remember, because, as I said, the press couldn't get enough of him, even if sometimes they lampooned these kind of hippie-ish methods. It wasn't another McLean, Jim or Tommy. It wasn't John Lambie. That this was something very different.
Yeah, he was box office, but he could never have survived at the Old Firm. dare I say, he was almost like Pedro. And that's not disparaging against Golach or against Pedro. It's just these kind of managers could never survive with their sound bites in the spotlight of the Old Firm, particularly when the Old Firm, that half of the Old Firm is doing badly. So, yeah, he was a fun character. He brought greyness. But he was one of those guys, almost like, dare I say, Chick Charnley, where it's fine to turn up and play one game in 5 and everybody raves about you. And the other 4, well, there's only too many in the dog actually watching you. And it's against, Dunfermline, Nice 5 in the Tayside Cup or whatever. I don't know. In terms of McLean, he was a brilliant coach. I mean, he was just a dreadful manager. But in terms of vision and how to do things, yeah, you don't expect him to pick somebody like Golach, but then would you have expected him to do half the things he did throughout his career? He was a guy that did the unexpected, and again, he was a man. I think we dodged the bullet in 83, November 83. He was another one who would never have survived at the Old Firm because he would just have been destroyed by the press, by the fans and everything. But as a coach, as a guy who could spot talent, I mean, you look at who came through that Dundee United kind of thing. I mean, he was able to spot a player, and players who were, i.e. the one we signed in Duncan Ferguson, who weren't, the prefect or the top boy. There was some tasty guys coming through there, and even Ralph Milne, whatever. He did pick weird flair players as well all along the way, but Golach was fun, as I recall, because you'd pick up the paper and it'd make you smile, which not a lot of the rest of Scottish football was doing at that point. We weren't doing that much, but arguably we were providing much more than anybody else, unless you want to say let's all laugh at Celtic.
Yeah.
But you would argue Golach was doing it in a relatively positive way. And in many ways he was right. I mean, you look at it historically, but even if you look at it at the time, was Rangers November 93 the same Rangers as February, March 93 or November 92? I don't think any of us could have said we were. So we weren't. We were on, whether it was slide was temporary and we were about to bounce back, or whether it was permanent, that was for the future at that point. Fact was, we are not as good a team at this point as we had been 12 months previously.
No, there's no doubt about
and
that.
therefore he was right.
He was. He just got blown up maybe a wee bit more than he anticipated. But right on the eve of that game, just to give some kind of context, Dundee United, as I said, are in 7th, but they're only 5 points behind us. Top. Rangers will get 27 points. You then get Aberdeen and Celtic on 25, along with Motherwell on 25, who have a game in hand. Hibs are in 5th place with 23, Kilmarnock with 22, alongside United. So, a wee bit, when's the last time this kind of happened? 89, 90 in this series, where you've got this kind of congestion around this time of year. But there's a feeling Rangers are kind of getting back into some kind of stride after that Celtic defeat, which of course we left last week with. There was a 2-2 draw away to Hearts in midweek. Hateley had scored 2 goals. Then we beat Kilmarnock away, Dundee at home. A couple of other stupid draws at home to Wraith Rovers. Again, Hateley scored both goals, 2-2. An away draw at Partick Thistle. And a very important 1-0 win away to Hibs. But things we're starting to pick up pace. There's 2 other games that I'll come back to in a moment. But United come here, by 20 seconds they're ahead. Dave Bowman in plenty of space, Maxwell coming out, disaster. 60 minutes, it's Paddy Connolly actually that's causing all sorts of problems with his pace. He beats the high line. Maxwell has no chance. He finishes very nicely. Dave McPherson goes off injured. Or maybe it's Richard Gough, because the they all
both
actually have their issues, yeah. But one goes off there. Then there's a third where again just absolute nonsense in the Rangers box that Craig Brewster taps in. He says the easiest goal I have ever scored. Well, Maxwell and co would give Laurel and Hardy a run for their money and present them with an easier one before the season was even out. But yeah, McPherson Goff coming off with again muscle knocks, and it kind of got, I say, bad to worse. It finished 3-0. Nothing happened in terms of the scoreline. But in the second half, Gordon Petric elbows Ian Ferguson, which doesn't get caught. Ferguson reacts. He spits on Petric, which does get caught on camera, and he gets sent off. This was right before my 13th birthday, and I was furiously hit with how bad Rangers had been, because I had a party that night. My party was all supposed to be about me. Then Golach at the end said, we were on our way to the top of the league, and it was only 3 points behind Rangers. And if you stuck a pin in that, Andy, right at that night, you say, oh, this is just typical. It's the fourth home defeat, more defensive calamity, more injuries, and now some indiscipline to boot. There's only 3 points separating 7 sides in the middle of December. Celtic are only a point behind. It's kind of making a mockery of this claim of Rangers superiority and indeed Celtic catastrophe. And that you could make an argument there, couldn't you, that this doesn't really look like what we're presenting on this show. However, it does turn out to be a bit of a mirage. This, as league tables often can be, that's why the only one that matters is the one at the end. But this defeat was the only defeat in 31 games between that the Celtic defeat and April the 26th. And it was a wobble. It was a notable wobble. It made all the headlines, but we actually were into the swing of things by then.
I think you're right. The name of the show is dominant, and if you looked at it at this point in time, you certainly wouldn't have thought it was going to be part of a show of that title. My recollection at the time, Martyn, was that I wouldn't say it was panic stations. It wasn't even close to panic stations. I think probably more would be the thought process that look how bad we have been, how stuttering we've been, and we're still top of the table. Yeah. And it was really a case of, if we ever decide to hit any kind of form or top gear, then we'll strip away from the rest. I don't think Dundee United were ever a serious challenger. I think that day you might have thought, well, anything could happen. It was a freak game, high lines, high defensive lines, 2 injured centre halves, Alan Maxwell having a nightmare, Paddy Conley having the game of his life, all kind of happened. These happen from time to time. I'm thinking about years later with Ivan Sproul play like Maradona at Ibrox for him, stuff like that. So it was a sore one, and the more alarmist amongst our support would have been ringing bells that night. But I do think that the overall feeling was, we're bad, but who's going to stop us, because we're still top of the league.
Yeah, I guess it's just that. It's the fourth home defeat. So at this moment in time, I can understand Rangers fans going, what is happening here? And the defence, and I include the goalkeeper, of course, in that unit, is just a disaster. Again, more injuries, more calamity. This is starting to feel typical. But as we would know by February, March, there was no real need for fear, and the signs were there already. The biggest sign, John, I would argue, happened on the 23rd of November, when Smith finally got a player that Rangers had tried to sign 5 times before that, which was Gordon Durie, coming from Spurs for £1.2 million. Money and timing were the reasons that Smith gave for the deals falling through before. Graham Souness starting that. He tried to get him from Chelsea. But the time had been right actually for a number of weeks for Durie. He had fallen out with the Spurs manager at the time, Ozzy Ardiles. He was substituted in a Coca-Cola Cup tie against Blackburn Rovers. He swore at the manager as he came off. He was fined. He was given a chance to train with the youth team. But a Rangers man, he took this opportunity when it absolutely suited all parties. And I guess with this, John, Rangers were assured experience work rate, and some much needed goals. Never prolific, but he would score, and he would score some kind of key goals over this run to give Hateley a rest, because Hateley was pretty much carrying a team on his back by this point.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds nowadays pretty glamorous if you're picking up somebody who's played for Chelsea and then Spurs in terms of the top echelon. This wasn't us competing with the top English teams for talent. But what he did do, and there's an argument for saying we should have signed him much earlier, summer before. Let's not go back over that stuff. But he gives you goals against the teams that you need somebody to just give you goals. You know, whether he can do it at the highest level will be in the future, but you pretty much know you're going to get a lot of energy. And in the Scottish League, he's going to batter in a few against the majority of teams. And that's what we absolutely need, because McCoist is in that period, and it tends to happen, doesn't it? You know, broken leg, you come back, you pull a muscle, you do this. I think you had a hernia there. Always happens after those serious things. All sorts of the rest of the body seem to go. And actually for McCoist, it lasts quite a while. I mean, it lasts probably another 18 months, really. Get with coming through. And he just comes in and he's different. As I say, we get rid of McSwiggan in the summer. I'm not saying Gary McSwiggan was brilliant, but he wasn't bad. McCoy's got the broken leg. Durant is used sparingly. I mean, all we have is two target men up front. And I've stuck up for Duncan. But there is a strong case for saying, where was the plan in having a plan B? I mean, we were in Warburton territory of, if plan A doesn't work with Hateley, then plan A is going to work with Ferguson, because the two of them are so similar. Where is this other player? And suddenly we have this other player coming in who's a Scottish international. I think he's getting picked fairly regularly at this point.
He is, yeah.
He's scoring goals, but as you see, he's not prolific. But that's international level and the English Premiership, as I guess it will be at this point. He's going to score goals for up here, and he knows what it's about, because he was more than we'd looked. I think Joe Wallace looked at him when he was playing with Hibs before he went down south. So you also know that he can handle the Scottish League, which, you know, we all laugh, but when you're in, it's easy to bring in players when we're top of the league and dancing about, Mel Sterling like or whatever. Mm-hmm. But this is bringing in somebody when we're in the midst of a paper-induced mini crisis, you would say. But really, I mean, I remember looking at, because I'm staying down south at this point, and there is a degree of objectivity you get when you're not in the West of Scotland press Monday to Friday. And we've lost 4 games, but they've all been kind of freak shows. Was it last injury time v Kelly, injury time
Celtic,
v Thames?
Late for Motherwell as well,
Yeah, you know, this game, I'm not sure McPherson and Goff were that injured. I think one of them might have been. I watched it today again. Goff's running off, and he doesn't look injured running off. And as he goes up the tunnel, he shouts something at Smith, who point blank ignores him. You know, and you're thinking, and I don't think Maxwell's that bad this day. He's had his moments. First goal you could make, but I mean, he's having to play sweeper because the other two are absolutely brutal, and it just feels like another one of those freak shows. It feels like losing 4-3 at Dens Park the previous season. And the other thing Andy's alluded to is you really begin to think, this is as bad as we're going to get. I mean, how many more, unless we've broke a mirror, walked under a ladder or whatever, this is as bad as we get. And yet nobody is 10 points clear of us.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's put in that spurt and won 5, 6, 7 and up and on the bounce to take them clear. They're all within touching distance at best of us, if not we're ahead. You know, and the Tims are in one of their daft runs because they get a new manager and, you know, Skip Timalou's doing the business. But everybody knows, you know, Carl Murgerton, Christopher or Wayne Biggins, you know, Gary Gillespie towing a caravan behind them. We've seen these runs from them before, some lovely results. but you know they've not got a 20-game streak in them at this point, unless there's no pressure. So it's more just, I think we finished one of the other games, the last one we were on with that Kilmarnock, where it just makes Saturday night awful.
Certainly made that Saturday night awful, I can promise you. Opening birthday presents with my face tripping me. Richard Gough was rushed back actually for that Dundee United game, so he wasn't expected to be fit, but Smith kind of maybe one of those, you fit Richard? Yeah, definitely. And yeah, he maybe wasn't. We've seen that before and since. And can you remember your reaction to Durie's signing? We're maybe getting used to this with Smith. He'd brought Gordon in November time a couple of years before because he felt Rangers needed something. This idea of a kind of winter, early Christmas present. Let me see, guys like Eric Bo Anderson in years to come that would come in and just get some goals, tide us over, and kind of move on before such things were banned with transfer windows. But as John said, Scottish internationalist, been linked before, and with the run of luck we're having with injuries, we must have been thinking, God, if Hateley pulls up, we're in big bother here.
You're right, the winter Christmas present was a thing. It was almost expected. I think the Durie signing was a signal or a kind of measure of how spoiled we were. Because here we were signing a very, very good, more than solid Premiership, well, it wasn't a Premiership then, but English First Division striker. Would it be the Premiership?
Yeah, it was the Premier League in their second season.
Was it? Was just 92, 93, wasn't it? So, and it was familiar to us, but there wasn't a wall-to-wall coverage of English football at that point, unless you had Sky TV. But it was a really, really good signing. He was a strong player, more than competent in all areas. And the fact that we got him, it was probably more a case of we'd been linked to him for so long that it went without any great fanfare. But it was a great signing. It was a really good signing at a really good time. And as you know from this coverage of this season, Hateley's carrying us completely. If you take Hateley out of the equation here, then to go back to the talk about would we win the league or what would we be thinking about, we would be in trouble. So Durie's signing was it was a masterstroke, to be quite honest with you, and it was long in the making. We'd always been linked to him. When I say it was always expected to happen at some point, but when it happened at a really, really good time for us in this season.
Yeah, the two league games before that Dundee United shock were probably more evidence of what's going to happen than the Dundee United shock, and Durie's impact is pretty much immediate. Rangers played Aberdeen and Motherwell at home. Both could have gone top if they'd beaten Rangers. Sorry, not at home. They played Motherwell at Fir Park. Both could have gone top if they'd beaten Rangers in these games, and Rangers responded. We've not got the Dundee United knowledge yet, but we have dropped these points. That Celtic defeat is in the mind, and there were absolutely no gimmies. But Rangers beat Aberdeen 2-0. Were superb that night. Durie's movement was noticeable, and Hateley was allowed then to torment Michael Watt again with two powerful goals. Rangers then went to Fir Park on the Saturday, early December, and Durie got one in each half. Rangers won 2-0. Again, powerful running, powerful awareness, and just giving Rangers an extra threat than just Hateley or maybe Ian Ferguson from the edge of the box. The response to the United defeat was pretty immediate. Rangers went up to St Johnstone, won 4-0. All 4 goals were headers. Hateley got 2, Durie got 1. Trevor Stephen got 1 on the ground. He somehow managed to head the ball home while it was still on the turf. Interesting that game kind of sums up Rangers' attacking route, John, because we scored 30 of our 74 league goals that season, over 40%, with headers. And that's 10% higher than the previous campaign. Probably shouldn't be a surprise given, as I said, we have Hateley running the thing. We're setting up at sometimes with 2 target men. But I always think, right, it serves us well, and we get over this period when we're backs against the wall. But Hateley was much more than just that, but Scottish football being in the way it is, there's the big in, just lump it up and we'll kind of make the most of it. We just seem to get used to playing that way, and Durie could head as well, as I said, but he just gave a wee bit more. But again, no one will write poetry about much of this season's play.
No, but it's also symptomatic, is it not, of what our squad is like. There isn't a lot of creativity, but actually where you maybe do have creativity is wide. Where Gary Stevens isn't really doing it, but could cross a ball. Asford Robertson, Trevor Stephen, Hustra, Miko.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to score it, it's not. I mean, Haley's not getting headers back to goal. We're getting down the sides and whipping it across. But you know, before, when you'd met McCoist and Haley, it offered you more interplay or whatever. But when it was either Haley on his own or Haley and Ferguson until Durie turns up, all we can do is cross it. You know, whether it be diagonal or get to it. I mean, it's just symptomatic of where we are. I mean, the other thing which is fascinating, and I hadn't spotted it until now, all the points we're dropping are when we play teams in the bottom half of the league or close to. Even when Celtic beat us, they're on a downer. When we have to, you've just named the league table at the beginning, and you've just said it was Motherwell, Hibs, and Aberdeen, and the other three teams we've just beat before Dundee United, who are in 7th. I think that's the other thing subconsciously to Scottish football, but also to fans, is when we have to turn up for a game against somebody who could put a marker down on us, we swat them aside. When there is nothing at stake, the adrenaline doesn't seem to flow through this team, and that's when bad things happen. It hadn't struck me until, we dropped points against Wraith Rovers, dropped points against Partick Thistle. I mean, you go and then you're saying the top that we've played also in this period, the three teams beside us at the top of the league, and we've beat every single one of them.
Yeah. Eventually, because Motherwell and Aberdeen gave us, certainly Aberdeen gave us an absolute hiding in September. But this is the traditional period we're used to now, and Andy's mentioned one reason why, because we'll strengthen. But what we are used to is Rangers just powering through, and that's kind of what we're doing. Just after Christmas, we drop. I don't know, it was an injury time penalty that dropped a point against Hearts, another 2-2 against Hearts, another Hateley double, absolutely bullying Davy Weir amongst others, or young Davy Weir amongst others, to get those 2 goals. Hogmanay then, Rangers are in second place, 1 point behind Aberdeen on 31 points, and ahead of Motherwell and Celtic with 29 and 28 respectively, but who had played 1 game fewer. The table again presenting this tight and competitive picture as the New Year trip to the East End lay in store. So, although beleaguered off the pitch, Lou Macari's Celtic were unbeaten on his watch, and they talked up the chances of a title during the festive break. He said that he didn't think there was any real gap between the sides in October. Jim Traynor, good old Jim, in his preview said that it was, and I quote, impossible to see Rangers taking even a point from Parkhead. But his match report would end up significantly different. Apparently by the time he wrote that, it was never on to believe that Gillespie and Dovcik would put the frighteners on a player of Hateley's confidence and power. Macari reminded his defenders at their Seamell base in preparation what to expect and how to respond, and apparently there were some nods belying the nerves and fears that the current fragile optimism could evaporate in a matter of seconds. 64 seconds, to be precise.
There's McCall. Hateley is onside. A great chance for Rangers right at the start of the match. And Hateley scores! The most dramatic opening to the Old Firm match. It's goal number 21 of the season, and it's scored in just 58 seconds. The Rangers supporters jubilant. The Celtic defence think that Hateley was offside. So the settling in process has not yet been completed, but either side, as Durie breaks there, that's great play. Neil Murray's in the clear. It's a great chance for the second. Murray against Bonner, and here's Michalchenko. It's number 2 for Rangers. And once again, the square defence has been breached, and this time there was no question of Murray being offside. Mikhalichenko has scored. There's the pass. Murray goes through the middle. You could have driven a bus through the Celtic defence. He kept his head here, but Bonner does extremely well to make the initial block. And there's Mikhalichenko with the accurate finish. Clever Stephen making a good run across to the left. Tackled by Collins. Advantage allowed with Rangers in possession. There's Hateley again. Now Durie. And the third scored by Mikhalichenko. And once again the Celtic defence was ripped asunder. 29 minutes on the clock. But Mikhalichenko reacted very swiftly to toe poke the ball home. This is Durie. Strong enough and quick enough to go past Gillespie. There's Kuznetsov. That's the fourth. That settles it all right. Oleg Kuznetsov with that dipping volley. There are just 14 minutes left for play.
Right, gentlemen, the 4-2 win at Parkhead. Were you both there? John, you would have been there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Andy?
One of the best.
Yep. Yeah, I was there, all right.
New Year's Day. It's incredible. We'd nearly managed to squeeze Miko in before Hateley runs through. So that's how open that Celtic were. Again, maybe this feeds into this bigging themselves up. No, we can take on Rangers. And it was heaven. Those opening 29 or so minutes. John, 3-0 up. Hateley just powering through. Jock Brown, I don't know if he's furious at what he's seeing, but he said, he could have driven a bus through that Celtic defence. You could have driven 2, I think. It was just scandalous, the kind of line that they were setting up with. Explain just what kind of delirium you were in by 3:30 on New Year's Day.
It's what you dream of. I think it was probably the best experience I've ever had at Parkhead. I mean, my abiding memory is after the second goal, and by this point I'm 20-30 yards from where I started, and you glanced up at their sort of Subbuteo. Well, that's doing injustice. It's a beautiful scoreboard, and it's got Celtic 0, Guest 2, 3 minutes on the clock. And, I mean, every ball, we don't even have to play good football. All we have to do is put a ball through the middle of their defence, high, low, anything. And I watched the highlights again, and I just started laughing. I don't mean the goals. I mean that first half hour. The ball just... We've got so many runners. It's not Hateley. I mean, you think, Hateley blew it away. She did with the first goal. Murray's bursting through. Durie's bursting through. Miko, I remember that night listening to Billy McNeil, and by the 6th time I watched it, I thought, just call him Miko. You've no chance of getting the He
was struggling, bless him. And it's fair to say that before that day, and Miko's played in a few Old Firm games by now, that the general consensus was this game just passes him by. He's too languid, too casual, and, well, he was sharp. I mean, he was absolutely on it. I think
he was up for it.
He took that first goal very well and just had the awareness and the presence of mind to be around to prod in that third. Andy, a young Andy McGowan, I mean, this, John's seen it and done it. This is uncharted territory for you, surely.
I were in ecstasy because to go ahead so quickly and in a fashion, it was like, you couldn't have scripted it better. They're fun to bits. You're scoring a couple of explosive goals. I mean, Hateley running through was a thing of beauty. The shape of his finish was fantastic. Their buffoon-like defending is glorious. they're pig sick within minutes. It was a great start, and then then all the fun and games begin with the fan running in the park and
I mean, this is
the scud missiles to direct stuff like that.
Yeah, so 3-0 is when, I mean, Walter Smith in his book that came out late in 1994 basically said, look, you can't legislate for Old Firm games. Lou Macari and that Celtic team would have been with great confidence going into that. They were in a good run, and he will not be able to tell you how this happened. Neither can I. Sometimes it just is in a category of its own. That's why the appeal will never fade. But even for the Old Firm levels and tensions and mayhem, I think we possibly went to new heights here. 3-0 down in half an hour. You get a Celtic fan, Martyn McCallum, is able to run onto the field of play and confront Ali Maxwell, but was stopped, I think, with purpose by John Brown and Richard Gough. He was sentenced to 2 months in prison on the 25th of January. I was drunk, he said. I wanted to be banned, and it was little wonder given what he was watching. And it was then that the home crowd's vitriol was turned towards the real culprits in their eyes, who were sat up in the director's box. There was, I was going to say friendly fire, unfriendly fire would probably be better, but I don't think it was a Rangers director, but a member of the Rangers party had to get stitches in the lip because they were hit by something. Mr. Kelly was asked if an apology was given. He said, well, David Murray never asked for one. But there were coins and pies and famously Mars bars raining down on the Celtic board. And John, it was arguably, this is probably the nadir, actually, for a club that was kidding themselves on that they were in the same race as Rangers, because that's what the table's telling us. And not only were they not, but they couldn't be. We get that John Collins goal to give them, right after half time, to give them a wee bit of hope, but it was punctured. The forgotten Ukrainian big Oleg Kuznetsov volleying in to make it 4, and Charlie Nicholas got a consolation that didn't really spoil a kind of happy new year. But that nadir was, in a way, a kind of perverse way, maybe something that needed to happen. If Rangers had won 1-0 that day, John, it was a tense game. One of those where Celtic are, in inverted commas, the better team, but Hateley just powers home a run at some point in the first half, and Rangers hang on for dear life. This really sets things in motion, and Celtic do get change within a couple of months. They, not for the first time in this series, have a nosedive in form after all this unbeaten run before it. They'd lose their next 2 games and draw the following 3. But with no kind of sporting interest remaining, they could boycott and they could protest properly. The current board, at the last minute, suggested a new share offer, which Matt McGlone, who's obviously the chairman of a fans group, he questioned what would stop David Murray and every Masonic lodge in the country from taking shares and exploiting it and taking control of Celtic. It would probably, this cartoon cavalcade then was probably at its lowest point, and we maybe wouldn't have it easy, or as easy, for some time, John, because this really did kickstart change for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was coming, but this was the game that just opened every fissure, and, if you like, fused all of the protest groups, because they had loads of them. I remember when it hit 3, and everybody talks about what went on in the main stand, but my abiding memory is there were sporadic fights in the jungle between Celtic fans who said you had to stay and others who were trying to leave and saying, I'm getting out of here. And it was, I don't think I thought it, but it was as low as they were going to get, because it was just one of those, everything was there. They were demolished on the park. They were falling apart off the park. I mean, it was just surreal. The guy attacked Maxwell. I think Brown got a couple of punches in, hit him with his hat. Derek Johnson was eating a Mars bar because he either replied. They were fighting in the jungle. And they'd been built up to, was Charlie Nicholas not the sports mate? Was he not a pal? Was he not? He was playing for them, but was he no spokesperson for Dempsey almost?
Yeah,
I mean,
much,
they were talking about it in the dressing room, and they were, are we boycotting? Are we not? Are we coming in late? Are we not? And then McCarry kind of gave them that kind of, hadn't lost a goal at home since, what is it, in 7 games until they play us. And then they've lost 3 in 29 minutes from our injury. I mean, you look at our team and the back four, and you're thinking, well, the smart thing is Garrick Stevens the right back, you play him at right back. John Brown can play at left back, play him at left back, and Stephen Presley the centre half, put him beside Goff. But we've got Presley at right back, Stevens at left back, and nobody looks at a position. I mean, it is weird. Okay, we've got Hateley, but I mean, the chances we create in that first half. And it just all blows apart. And I remember McCarry after the game, he actually starts talking about Rangers players, which they are not, Celtic managers are not allowed to do. And he said, I knew for the start, saw Big Hateley, and I thought, he's up for it. And you're going, I remember sitting in the bus and I'm going, he doesn't know the script up here. He's not allowed to, he's supposed to say them and him.
Yeah.
And it just all felt completely, and then they go to Firhill and they lose their Geordie Shaw, who was a bit of a scourge for them around this time. I think it's about his 3rd winner in 3 years. And they're just but they've been falling apart off the pitch for a while. Canvas Lang. I think that's the other thing in terms of our overall feeling this season. No matter how bad we are, you're looking across the city when, even if you get beat with the United, you're looking at them, never mind the scores, and saying, and you're just laughing. You're literally laughing because they're falling apart before your eyes. And I don't think anybody believed they were going to go bust, but you knew they were a few years away from being challengers again. And you were just enjoying it. It was really, I mean, they were cartoon cavalcade. It was hilarious. You could not cover all the antics they had. I mean, Andy will have stories, you'll have stories. Everybody's got stories that remember, and if you got together, 3 of us, it'd be like a 3-hour special, easily going through.
It's the Banteliers thing, isn't it? I mean, this is the time, or just a couple of months later, when they cracked crest and on the front page of the Sunday Mail, and it really looked like being the end. Andy, they did save it, or Fergus McCann saved it. Looking back, he was a figure of fun, certainly in Rangers chat. The wee guy with the bonnet and the specs who didn't know there was an Old Firm game going on when he was claiming he was such a big supporter, and his plan seemed like another fantasy. Again, remember the context of Canvas Lang and the space age stadium that the Kellys and Whites were going to build, and all of that. And you've got Dempsey out in the car parks, the Rebels of One, with clear connotations there. You were a lot younger at the time. But can you remember any kind of feeling that, this is going to change? Like, here is the turning point for them, or was it it's just another character they've brought out, this incredible cast that can be lampooned, and he looks a bit funny and talks a bit funny with that kind of mid-Atlantic thing. Can you remember any kind of impact at that time?
I can't remember there being any fear or apprehension of Fergus McCann rolling up. And I think you've got to appreciate how deep into comedy territory we were, as Alan's alluding to. I mean, I was 16, 17, and my hobby was sending in cartoons to Mark Dingwall for the Follow fanzine. And you'll see them in there, Martin. And they were all about, pictures of Michael Kelly, pictures of the Celtic board, pictures of Canvas Lang. The Canvas Lang stadium was a toilet bowl, stuff like this. I was having a time of my life. So I think. So sorry,
you were drawing these cartoons.
I used to draw.
This is a revelation.
There's a scoop for you.
A revelation.
They'll be in there somewhere. If you're doing your research, man, through Follow, look out for my nom de plume, which was Cheeky Chappy. There you go, Follow fanatics.
There we are. My word.
But I think the more savvy Rangers fans knew that it couldn't go on forever. There was signs of stability, but we still had a long way to go before they would be coming close to us.
Yeah, you still get that gap. What I find interesting is the kind of media campaign to oust the board and get change, and the fact that Scotland needs an old firm. It needs Rangers and Celtic. It needs a strong Celtic as well as a strong Rangers. Stuff that I don't imagine was overly prevalent, and I certainly haven't found it being overly prevalent in the early 80s. The other way. Certainly wasn't prevalent from 2012 onwards. Here's Jerry McNee. After change has come, this is in his Sunday Mail column. This has to be said, there are at least 4 people who still have to go. I won't rest till they do. For the best part of 6 years, I've campaigned here and elsewhere to help bring down a Celtic board rotten to the core. I have campaigned. This is the voice of football, Jerry McNee self-styled, the voice of Scottish football. It's common in a one-team city, Newcastle United, for example, in recent years, where you would have sports writers who are Newcastle fans, funnily enough, and writing for Newcastle titles about the kind of cancerous ownership that they were suffering at that time. Is it really appropriate for a city like ours to have a media as hell-bent on forcing change, or should we grow up and just accept that, we know Jeremy McNee's leanings? He's written books about Celtic and has been a critic of Celtic, but a critical fan, I guess, for so many years. Andy, I'll start with you and then John. It's an odd dynamic, and again, I'm not sure there was as much noise in the early 80s about the need for a strong old firm.
No, I mean, that was the punchline that, we need a strong Celtic. This is something we found particularly ironic, given exactly as you say, in the 80s when we were absolutely garbage, there was not one utterance of that kind of sentiment at all. But you're right, it kind of exposed what we always suspected, which is that there was a large cohort in the Fourth Estate, which was basically, to use the term of the 90s, Celtic-minded, and they were mobilised by the kind of momentum that Matt McGlone and his fanzine started. They just became an extension of that, and you're thinking about, Keevans was one, McNee was other, but McNee was a fly one because he kind of straddled credibility because he was the commentator for Scott Sport, and his exclusives on a Friday night, I can exclusively reveal on a Friday night Scott Sport. But it was like a political campaign. If you think about, we're very familiar nowadays with social justice campaigns and things like that take form very quickly and gain momentum, and you would use social media nowadays. It was a forerunner to that, very much. It's so. Like, it was that kind of fuel.
It's like Martyn Tyler or John Motson writing incessantly or talking incessantly about the Glazers, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I get the local beat reporters in cities with only one club. I totally understand that. But when he's, as I said, the self-styled voice of Scottish football, which I imagine covers the whole of football, which would suggest some kind of independence and objectivity. Yep, John, I've campaigned. The days before fan media, eh?
Yeah. Like, if you were being kind to the way it worked out in the early 80s, you could argue you had Dundee United, Aberdeen, Celtic. So there was a competition. In the early 90s, there was us. But there was this historic jealousy of us, and the times were changing. We were moving from being, shall we say, conservative small C unionist to slightly less. And also, they get a free pass. It's and Matt McGlone says it, what he says. But if you went to, and I'd be curious about you two, if you went to a non-denominational school, that I did, you had Celtic supporters, Thistle supporters, Aberdeen, you had a wide spectrum. Rangers were the biggest support, but in my school, I'm not sure they were quite the majority, but that would be early 80s. If you went to a Catholic school, they would almost all be Celtic fans. And there is that whole, and therefore you have it all the way through. And Matt McGlone, I mean, that is an outrageous statement. I mean, actually, if you look at what Fergus McCann did, he took it on in a pure Calvinist capitalist way.
Yeah.
I'm here for 5 years. I'll get you to the top, and then I'm cashing out, and I'm going to make a lot of money in this deal. And he did what he said in the tin. I mean, he didn't, but that was his. I always thought that was the danger, not him, but of them, that they moved away from that emotional, knee-jerk, we're a Celtic, we've got a chip in the shoulder, and actually you ended up with a businessman who just saw things in black and white and didn't buy into any of the superstitious nonsense or hysterical stuff. And that was a risk, and that's where it was. But because of all of this, they get a free pass because they were representing the whole community in a way that if you were a Rangers fan, say David Leggett coming out or whatever, you would get other people from what you might call the non-denominational community saying, hang on a minute, that's nonsense. There'd be self-criticism, there'd be Aberdeen supporters, etc., Dundee United, all saying Motherwell, all saying, no, you can't say that. That's not right. Which is true, it isn't right, and you couldn't. But they've had a free pass forever. I mean, has it actually changed over the past 30 years in any shape or form? It's probably got worse, I would argue, because it's more entrenched. And Kelly was Michael Kelly was the Lord Provost of Glasgow.
Yeah.
And then he goes on the Celtic board. I mean, it just was, but it was accepted that that's how they did it. And because they were so poor and so laughable, we didn't see them at this point as being, what would you say, competitive with this.
They're not.
Couldn't see it for a number of years.
It's just when it's going to be, and we'll keep an eye on it, obviously, as the show goes on. But I think at some point, maybe near the end of this series, we'll have to have a discussion about the two different revolutions. I guess there's, I don't know if you can call it a revolution, because it did take its time, painstakingly so. I think if you were a Celtic supporter, on too slow and falling out with players who are not paying enough and all of that, whereas ours was clearly, we can go back to 1986, an absolute smash bang. But that's for another day. Rangers at this winter, doing what they do, they're able to manoeuvre themselves out of a tricky position. There is a crushingly dull 0-0 draw at Pittodrie on 22nd of January. Suited Rangers perfectly kept us top before a run of 7 league wins on the spin that really ended this chase in any kind of meaningful way. And once again, Gordon Durie is at the heart of it. Scored 2 in a 5-1 win over Thistle at Ibrox, the first in a 2-0 win over Hibs, the winner in a 2-1 win away to Wraith, the final goal on a 4-0 home rout of St Johnstone, and the equaliser at home in the vital match at home to Motherwell on the 5th of March. They were 4 points behind Rangers with a game in hand, and this was realistically the last chance for Tommy McLean's team to keep their dream alive. And it looked promising. Paul Lambert rocketed a shot into the top corner in the second half, but Durie responded with the help of a deflection to turn the tide, and then it was his driving run in injury time that led to John Philbin's handball and a gift from the penalty spot that Haitley was never likely to pass up. Fittingly, Motherwell and Aberdeen would draw that game in hand, leaving Rangers 5 clear with only 12 remaining. By this point, it wasn't only Gordon Durie's introduction that was making the difference. Andy, Rangers were starting to look like their old selves. Some heroes returning from the shadows. Andy Goram came back for the game against Hibs. McCoyce had recovered from that other operation that John mentioned, his hernia that kept him out since December. And now Walter Smith had a full defensive options from which to choose. And even Duncan Ferguson was back in the squad. We should make note that just after New Year, 20,000 people, over 20,000 people, turned up at Ibrox to watch Rangers and Celtic in a reserve game, and Duncan Ferguson scored an equaliser. really only Ian Durrant's absence was notable, as McCall and Ferguson were starting to get their understanding together. Trevor Stephen was starting to roll back the years. McCoist and Haitley got the band back together at Tynecastle, a goal apiece in a 2-1 win, and the ultimate talisman, injury time away to Partick Thistle at Firhill, popping up with a brilliant dramatic winner. We should say that David Murray, undeterred by his caution and fine for talking about Rangers signing players publicly, he dismissed that and said the Rangers were likely to bid for Gary McAllister in the summer. A remark that drew an official complaint from Leeds United. But yeah, things coming back together, Andy, in this springtime.
So earlier we spoke about the fact that we were considered to be poor and out of form, but still top of the league. And I think that this run of games was when we just nudged it up a wee bit to the point where, we started to show a semblance of form. I think there was probably 11 games unbeaten between February to end of April, something like that. A couple of games drawn. But as you say, players were coming back in. There was notable for performances. Durie was certainly making a big difference in helping the load that was on Haitley's shoulders, 100%. And the Partick Thistle, if I'm right, was that the one? It was a last-minute winner?
Yeah, injury time. Brilliant. He just pops up in the box, hurdles the advertising holdings. Because again, he's frustrated. He comes back from a broken leg, probably a bit too soon, scores a ridiculous win on the cup final, but then, his body really isn't able to cope with that return, and he's got a hernia problem and all of that. But yeah, things coming back. Rangers heroes coming to the fore when it mattered, I guess, in the early springtime as we were used to, and a chairman talking about summer targets. Scottish football was maybe correct to ask what had really changed. Well, beware the transient illusion of football, I suppose. Andy Gorham lasted 2 months before he injured himself again at Tannadice in a 0-0 draw, and the chat was that he probably wasn't living his best life off the pitch. And Smith, increasingly tetchy all through this season in terms of his interviews about his side's attitude. He banned his players from speaking to the media after a poor performance at home to Aberdeen. Rangers drew 1-1. They were winning 1-0 an early goal by Stuart McCall. He said the players have been hearing and reading too much about the league having been won. They're only human, and this sort of thing has taken the edge off their play. But then when the media would criticise the Rangers or criticise the rest of Scottish football, Smith would get kind of tetchy as that. This is not the case, because Rangers have had to work really hard to achieve what they've done in recent times. And he's kind of flip-flopping a wee bit. But where he got the most criticism, guys, was our return to Hampden, the new look Hampden, for the Scottish Cup semi-final. Rangers had defeated Hearts at Ibrox in getting there. The first game on the Sunday, live on telly, was 0-0, and it was dreadful. I can't really describe how bad a game of football this was. The replay wasn't much better. Rangers in trouble again, but this time, well, as many times, it was Durie and Haitley. Durie doing all the running, Haitley being in the right place at the right time. Almost certainly offside for the first, and that ball probably didn't cross the line either. Somehow Rangers were in the final. But can we just have a brief word, maybe even a minute's silence for that first game against Kilmarnock, John, because it summed up everything that was lifeless about this whole season.
Yeah, we only turn up when we have to, don't we? Yeah, probably the worst thing Kilmarnock could have done was scoring against us in the replay. They should have just played for penalties or the third replay or whatever it was going for, because all the way through we suddenly find that when the chips are down, and you can always go at the well until the one time you go at the well, and actually you can, but that's for maybe next week. But it is, the two games were crap, weren't they? I mean, Hampden was crap as well. The new look Hampden, you're like,
yeah. What was our reflection?
It's like
on
jungle.
that?
You just put seats in it.
Yeah, because it. I mean, I went to both games, and I was in the North Stand for the first, and then behind the Rangers goal for the replay. But it was, it looked good, but Andy, it didn't sound particularly good. There was no. I mean, to be fair, the game was not exciting anybody. Neither game was. So maybe that maybe played into it, but it was all this money for this.
It was total underwhelming. I mean, my opinion of Hampden Park's never changed since then. It was a missed opportunity. They could have done something special, because I think the money was significant. I'm not saying they could have built a stadium for the same money, but there was a kind of blinkered, myopic, we're staying at Hampden, this is the way forward. You know, MD's ever try to get to Hampden, make this into an episode about, you know, civic transport links to this national stadium. If MD's trying to get us to Hampden by any means whatsoever, they know how hard it is. So even then, 16-year-old Andy's shaking his head saying, why are we doing this? And nobody really spoke up and applied any pressure. Nobody really cared. You know, Rangers fans are too interested in Rangers, and the SFA, we hated them. And so it just happened. And then we go out there and we're like, okay, so you've plonked some seats in, can you see in the first 20, 30, 40 rows, and you've got a shiny new stand. And that was about it. It was totally underwhelming. Still is.
And they need to do it all again in a few years. So this Rangers side then, physically, mentally shattered. I think that's very obvious, but they find reserves to ensure they got what they needed. That replay, a perfect example. But you know, the apparent closeness in competition early in the season shouldn't mask the fact that this was a dull season of Scottish football with very little with which to recommend it. John, the one obvious exception, as I mentioned at the start of the show, apart from Ivan Golic and some of the colour there, was of course Mark Hateley. He would be Player of the Year, the first Englishman to win that award. Terry Butcher, I would suggest, scandalously overlooked in 86-87. You don't care if Brian McClure scored 60 goals. The 2 goals against Kilmarnock brought his tally to the season for 30. Unfortunately for Rangers, though, that second goal, that winner, would be his last of the season. He kind of finally run out of steam. But we're forever indebted for what he did that season, because he was outstanding.
Yeah. I mean, this was you thank, but this is a start of, I would say, a run of 3 seasons where one man carries the team, maybe to greater or lesser extent. But yeah, I mean, without him, if you look at it statistically, where were these goals that were going to turn all these losses and draws into victories? And it was one of those things, and there was a kind of Scottish bias against giving it to the Englishmen, because we had a fair few decent English players, particularly in the period 86 to 90, particularly Butcher in the first season, you see, who should have won it. And
Trevor Stephen 89-90.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't go to Marseille for $5.5 million because you've been playing pretty average.
Yeah.
You know, and then in 86, 87, it was all about, well, he's a top goal scorer. And then in the following season, when I think McCoy's was still goal scorer, it was, well, it's got to go to the top player in the top team when they won the league. So there always was this kind of bias. But no, I mean, he carries it. It probably does him no favours, and I'm talking as in hindsight, as an individual player. I think this season takes its toll on him. I think 92, 93 take its toll on Gorham, McCoy and a few others. I think he weathers that, but I think this is a season that, you know, we run him into the ground quite literally, because he's probably got another half season after this, and then he picks up a lot of injuries after that.
And even at this stage, even at this stage, he's talking about playing centre half and extending his career that way. And,
he wasn't a centre half. I mean, Derek Johnson did it. He was a different player that way, but I think they tried. I don't know when they tried it. Was it this season or the next season?
They would try it the following Saturday, which was a remarkable day. We'll call it quits there. I think we've done well. Hateley getting all the plaudits. I would suggest, and I know he's not a glamorous player. I know he never scored against Celtic. But for all that Hateley absolutely did drive that Rangers team on, the introduction of Gordon Durie that year is vastly underrated, undervalued, and unloved. I think his impact on the team, his work rate and what he did off the ball, as well as chipping in 12 goals in 20 games, 20 league games. That's not inconsiderable, and he deserves, I think, a lot more plaudits than he gets. But anyway, we're nearly done with this horrendous season. Thank you, John.
Thank you, but actually I prefer this season to the one that's about to come up, so I'm not really complaining too much.
Yeah, in terms of silverware, it's not going to get much better. Andy, thank you.
My pleasure, man.
What happened that following Saturday afternoon could have been the perfect link between these two eras of Rangers history. On 16th of April, Rangers defeated Wraith Rovers 4-0 at Ibrox to go 7 points clear at the top with only 12 points left to play for, and the man who was supposed to take over from Hateley in the long term finally got off the mark. Less than a minute into the second half, with Rangers already 2-0 ahead, Duncan Ferguson broke free from the left and clipped a beautiful strike into the corner of the net. The relief was palpable, and Ferguson was booked for his over-exuberance. In an ideal world, this was a beautiful time at which to turn over to a new chapter. Hateley had carried a team on his back as his young replacement adjusted to life at a big club and regained his fitness. And then, just as he himself was tiring, the baton could be passed over. In the real world, however, it was what Ferguson did in the first half that was more important, and what effectively ended his Rangers career. Until next week, bye for now.